and rolling.
State coach Jim Donnan is also on the line with us, and as we do every week with our podcast, this is our first one on YouTube. Coach, we'd love to hear your initial thoughts from Georgia's 55-0 win.
Ouch.
This one here, and you're not really worried about the PR here. You're just thinking about coach family, but very good outpouring there. So overall, where we are, and looking forward to next week to get after Notre Dame.
Well, and Radi, let's kick it to you and Jake and just get your initial reactions being there at Sanford Stadium.
650 yards of offense, six or fifth or sixth for Georgia football. Defensive shutout. I don't know. Special teams looked good. I mean, Vince had a good time. They showed their support, as Coach Donnan said. I mean, you remember last week we were speaking to Coach Donnan and said you'd have to be a just pessimistic person to find any problems with last week. You would have to be pretty much an ass to find something that you hated about this. You did. You shut them out. You scored at will, pretty much. Maybe the fact they went 4 of 10 on.
Yeah, you're nitpicking at that point.
Yeah,
I mean, points with a shutout. Look, you're going to convert. You can have some third down, score any points. You can convert some third down. So overall, I was very impressed with Georgia today. As Coach said, I thought that a lot of that started to click.
388 yards, 388.
And I don't care who you're playing. That's not what we've seen from Georgia. We're not used to seeing that, and that's a great omen, I think, headed into next week.
Yeah, and Coach, one of the things that I was really impressed with were some of the freshmen that got into the game and made some plays. When you're talking about Dom Blaylock, you see some of the same things from George Pickens, receivers. Lewis Sine got his first interception for Georgia. Seeing these freshmen come to age quickly, what does that mean from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, I just think it's really good to see Dom get his shot. I mean, I read on Twitter where Radi said maybe Robertson was held out with a minor injury, and I don't know if Coach Smart said anything about it, but I think when you get your shot, you got to get in there. We lose Simmons, I hope for not long, but Pickens got to play more, and he was a target. He made some really good catches, but we passing game. We underthrew a couple, and you can't. You get a little picky there, but we had a couple deep shots that really looked like the opportunity to make big plays, and certainly next week will be challenging. And I was a little surprised that we had one situation there early in the game, up 7-0, 4th-and-1 against an inferior opponent like Arkansas State there, and we went ahead and kicked the field goal. I think Kirby just trying to send a message to our team that you can't be screwing around in the red zone, which we did. And he just said, "Hey, I'm gonna penalize you, make you kick a field goal." So, but overall, as you mentioned, our defense has only given up one touchdown. And the one thing that I'll keep saying that we say on our Tuesday show, that for the people that don't get to hear that, and I do remember that we're going to have it at Your Pie next week, Roddy. So,
I'm glad you remember that.
The one thing that's very important right now to me, and people are going to say, "What anybody?" which is true, but every Tuesday and Wednesday we play a top 5 team for 2 hours and a half. Our offense plays against our defense, is against our offense. About 100 plays every Tuesday and Wednesday. So our competition has been slight in the games, but we've had tremendous competition in practice.
If you're just joining us here on YouTube Live, I'm Dayne Young with UGAsports.com. That was the voice of former Georgia head coach Jim Donnan. He's on the line with us. And you see Radi Nabulsi and Jake Roos live from Sanford Stadium. If you have comments or questions that you want to get featured on here, we're monitoring those as we go, so please be sure to share those. Jake, I want to go to you because one of the things that I was impressed with was Georgia was able to get a rush and not have to blitz too much, even though they did blitz at certain times. What have you seen from this defensive line growing from Vanderbilt to now 3 games into the season?
Well, you got to be encouraged by it, I think. And you're seeing a lot of guys rotate in. I think that's been a big key, especially going into this Notre Dame game. You got a lot of guys now who have game experience under their belt. One of the knocks against this group was game experience. Guys like Devontae Wyatt, Trayvon Walker, just getting their feet wet in this system. I think the opportunity for them to play in a couple of games like this and take that step forward has been big for Georgia. And really, I think that's true across the team. I think that the opportunity for these guys to get in there, the young guys to make an impact, very impressed with that. I think most of all, I was impressed that Georgia was able to zero in on this week, looked incredibly focused. You didn't get any sense that they were looking ahead to next week against Notre Dame. And I think that after Coach mentioned, three games of not the highest caliber, it can be tough to keep focus. Impressed with how they did that today.
Coach, when you have a team and I've heard you say Kirby's not going to let his guys look ahead. That's just not going to happen. That's not what he does. But everyone else in Athens has been looking ahead to this Notre Dame game for a year, 2 years, maybe since the last Notre Dame game. Just from a coaching perspective, what do you have to do to keep your team rolling like Georgia is today? You mentioned Georgia Tech had their loss to the Citadel. Georgia's not having these speed bumps against lesser opponents. They're taking care of business. How do you make that happen as a coach?
Well, I think we've said it over and over, but I'm going to repeat it for everybody. Is just the conditions that we have at practice are game-like conditions that simulate things that you need to do, whether it's red zone offense versus red zone defense, coming out offense off the goal line. All these situations that you see in a game, we put immense pressure on our team in practice to perform and defend and go against each other. And I think that carries over as the way our team has progressed since Kirby's taken over. And the ultimate deal here is the fact that you're going against guys that you're competing against and you're trying to win a position at the same time. If something happens to somebody, like, we had something happen to Wilson, and Salyer comes in there and does a good job, and so did Cade Mays when he moved out. So we've got a really good competitive situation. And the other thing is, our kids know what the schedule is. They understand all that, and they have a lot of fun getting back and forth with each other about not. I think the other thing that we got to give our coach credit for is we've spent some time on Notre Dame now. I mean, in the spring and in the summer camp, we hadn't exactly been sitting over there working on Arkansas State all the last 2-3 weeks. So we'll be ready to go.
Well, Kirby, he says, no, we're not butts. I agree with Coach. You can't tell me that sometime in the spring and sometime in those in the summer workouts, there wasn't a thought of, hey, what do they have at edge rusher? What do they have? What's that offensive line like? Who are their wide receivers? And if anything, Jake Fromm looked ahead.
Oh, no question. Sure. I mean, I think that you have to anticipate that. Coach, I wanted to ask you, how tough is it really? We talk a lot about looking ahead. How tough is it to keep a team from doing that, especially with a matchup of this stature on the horizon?
It's tough, but at the same time, let's just say you're one of our edge rushers and you're working one-on-one in practice and you're having to get around Isaiah Wilson or Thomas, and you got Coach Lanning over there beating down on you. You're not thinking about finding a way to win your job there and stay with your job. And I think that's really part of what we're saying is you can't be looking ahead when you've got to go your day-to-day. You have to get through every day, and part of that is one-on-one competition and team competition. But now we don't even have to answer that question or ask it because if we were looking pretty good job of taking care of business, and if we weren't looking ahead, then we'll be ready to go this week. So it's a big game, but I'm not ready to anoint Notre Dame right now and say that this is mission impossible. When you think about that stadium on Saturday night, I mean, I think we're going to have one of the best atmospheres ever at Dooley Field at Sanford Stadium with a national audience watching. It's just going to be incredible atmosphere. And you guys are such gurus on recruiting. It'll be a who's who on before the game. The guys walking around. You could have an NFL team potentially on some of these guys that are going to be here visiting for this game. Isn't that right?
Oh, there's no question about it, Coach. This week I will say for those watching at home, the shortest list of recruits. I did not spot a recruit this week. That's the first time in the Kirby Smart tenure that's been the case. I think they had to just be giving everybody a rest this week because next week is going to be so intense. You're talking about 5 stars coming from all across the nation. Darnell Washington, Noah Sewell, who we'll have a story with. Look for Keely Ringo to make the trip. I would expect to see him out there.
5-star.
I mean, Kendall Milton's coming to town, 5-star. It's going to be one of the most ridiculous recruiting weekends to go along with that electric game atmosphere.
2021 5-star.
Well, one thing, Jake, too, is that when you have games like this, maybe the recruits weren't there, but I guarantee you some of these guys saw Kenny McIntosh get in there and get his shine late in the game. Having moments like that have to help recruiting in terms of the depth and understanding that, hey, yeah, you may come in and you may be 4th or 5th on the depth chart, but if you work, you'll have your time.
Yeah, and there's no question about that either. I think that Kirby Smart has made that clear. And it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to put that into practice. And I think George has done a fantastic job with that. When you mention a guy like Kenny McIntosh coming in 5th in the depth chart, one of the most loaded rooms in the nation at the running back position. Kirby Smart mentioned that after the game, said, look, this is a kid who comes from a high level of competition. He's not scared. He's done the things we've asked him to do, and it's paying off with opportunities for him. You've got to be excited if you're a young, talented player watching at home and feeling that you can make an impact regardless of where you go.
67 yards for Kenny Mack.
And a touchdown, yeah. We do have a couple injury questions here on our YouTube chat. Tyler Simmons, Demetrius Robertson, Radi, Jake, what are you hearing from the stadium?
We asked Coach after the game, what's going on. He says that Demetrius Robertson has a nagging injury. Wouldn't say what it was, but we tweeted out that we're hearing that it is a minor hamstring issue. He said minor nagging injury. We hear it's a minor hamstring issue. In a game like this, you don't need to make him play, so you sit Demetrius Robertson. You have him at full strength next week. We've seen them do that, and then it's not like Don Blaylock was having a bad day. You bring in the number 2 guy, and he kills it for you. Tyler Simmons was kind of banged out of bounds. They said he had a banged up shoulder. Kirby says that they'll have to check on it, but he thinks he was fine. He will be fine. And says that there was a possibility that if needed, Tyler Simmons could still play. So I don't think that it's anything. It's unlike Kirby to come out and say, oh, yeah, I think he'll be fine. Usually if he doesn't know, he'll just say, I don't know. So, or we're waiting on an x-ray. I mean, what was it with Curious Jackson when he had the hand of the Vanderbilt game? Hey, we got to see what the x-rays say. So I think that he got kind of a quick update that is not too – and here's the thing. Tyler Simmons – tough as hell. That is a tough dude. He gets hit pretty hard, and it's going to take a lot to keep Tyler Simmons from saying he's ready for that game.
Well, Coach, in the chat, someone's talking about George Pickens, saying that he is the man. I want to know from your perspective, when you have a player like George Pickens who is emerging on the scene nationally, he is a true freshman, obviously an elite talent. How do you manage him? Manage knowing that the task gets more difficult as he starts getting the best defender from the other team's secondary on him.
Yeah, I think it's been managed extremely well. First of all, Kirby wouldn't give him a jersey number to let him know he had to earn it, which that's what you got to do. I mean, even though you're a 5-star player out of Alabama, player of the year and all that, you got to come in here and earn your spurs. And so we didn't know right to the last minute if he was going to be number 1 or not. And so I think you just let him know that you work your way up the ladder. And I think that the general tendency of all fans, and it was like that, it's been like that ever since I've been coaching, is to talk a little bit more about the guys that are coming on, the newest guys, and not enough about the guys that have earned their spurs. I mean, Landers had a couple shots today that maybe he could have had, that, if a little bit more accurate, or maybe use both hands. We've seen what Simmons can do, and but certainly Pickens is a different kind of animal as far as his ability to make jump up there and make big plays. And, we've seen all these one hand catches. So, as far as handling freshmen, we had a freshman receiver and Terrence Edwards that played for me my first year that really was very similar. That could come in here and just be electric when he gets the ball. And I think that's what you got there in Pickens, and getting that experience in these 3 games, even though he didn't catch one the first game. The last 2 he's really started to surface, and he's going to be a big target, and it looks like Jake looks for him too. And that's the other thing we just take for granted. But I thought Jake was, if you look at his stats the last 2 weeks, he hadn't missed many passes. He's been great on the checks, and he gives us tremendous advantage going into a game like Notre Dame, where you're going to be able to check at the line with the crowd noise, and then they're going to have a hard time with our crowd. I guarantee you they're going to have some trouble jumping offside.
This place is going to be worse than bonkers. Coach, I want to point out something. George Pickens led the team with 5 receptions for 84 yards. Dominic Blaylock was second with 4 receptions for 112 yards. I'm no math major, but that's 196 yards, 9 catches for 2 freshmen.
And then Lawrence Cager right behind him. That's 3 brand new additions to this team this year, making a huge impact on the receiving end for the Bulldogs. You got to love it.
12 catches, 2 touchdowns, 200 yards between those 3 guys who were not playing here last year. Impressive.
Well, and then you've got Lawrence Cager with his downfield blocking as well. I mean, that's something that Georgia has relied on him upon. And you still have the tight ends. I'm seeing more and more of John Fitzpatrick out there throwing hard blocks along with Eli Wolf and with Charlie Warner. Their value, Georgia's not shy of running 2 tight end sets, Coach, and I think that's because they see that those 3 guys can handle the load.
Yeah, and the other thing, it just gives you a chance to balance up the defense. When you can go 2 tights, where you have a tight end on both sides and 1 back, and then 2 wides, whether they're on opposite sides of the field or on the same side in a twin split, it just makes the defensive front have to either slant or have to balance up. And when that happens, when you're going against these big guys, it just creates a lot of running area. And we do a good job with our motion too. I thought misdirection today was excellent with our the play that Cook scored on, where he lined up wide, shifted to a position, which made the defense react a little bit, and then they ran a little reverse back to him, and he showed you again why every time he doesn't touch the ball, it makes you wonder why he's not touching it more. Slippery, and but you got Swift in there, and you got Harrion, and I just don't want to go overboard here because all these guys are good, but our competition is getting ready to step up Notre Dame, but I don't know who else our competition is going to be, looking at some of these teams that I've watched the last few weeks in the Eastern Division. It's just we're not going to get tested too much. Maybe Auburn, but who knows. But right now, I think our team is very talented, extremely well coached, and has a good sense of direction going down the rest of the year.
Well, and yet also another week of just tremendous kicking effort from Jake Camarda and Rodrigo Blankenship. Radi, Jake, I don't know where your perspective was, but I was hearing that Rodrigo's initial kickoff to start the game, that some people thought that could have gone out of the stadium. It was boomed. All right, may have lost them. Coach, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we may have lost Radi and Jake for a second there at the stadium, so
Well, hey, we could lose them for a little while. They probably need to go over there and get a couple drinks anyhow.
They may be tailgating already for Notre Dame. Yeah. People are going to have to get their spots for next week.
Yeah, they'll have we lost them or what?
I do not see them. Or they're going to have to get their spots.
I can see them, but
They must be
So that's
frozen.
just me and you run with it here.
Oh yeah, Coach Jim Donnan and Dayne Young here on our YouTube live page, and Radi Nabulsi and Jake Roos may pop back in here if their internet works well. You talked about James Cook. We've talked about seeing Zamir White out there. One of the things you kind of mentioned with Jake Fromm, how you kind of take it for granted because he does it every week. Kind of the same thing with DeAndre Swift. I mean, he's still getting his his carries are being managed, I think, well, but he's just special with the football in his hands, and I think you'll definitely see him lead the pack next week against Notre Dame. What can you say that about DeAndre Swift and what he means to Georgia's offense?
Yeah, one of the things that was brought out during the telecast today was the fact that Swift's such a threat out of the backfield. If you go back to when he was just a true freshman, when we had Chubb and Sony, he was a guy we used on third down because he was just so good at making a routine catch, and he showed it today with him catching the flat and long run. We threw 2 passes today, 5 yards. They both went for 60-yard plays. One in the flat to Blaylock, and then the one to out of the backfield to Swift. And I really like the way Coley's using their backs out of the backfield, where they're not just a check down back. They're running and catching the ball at full speed where a guy's got to make a tackle on him as compared to flaring him out and everybody sees it. If you fake to a guy and then come to him, boy, that is very, very difficult to make an open field tackle. And I think that's a well-designed and well-thought-out scheme that we got with that little rollout. And, hey, let's give Stetson Bennett a lot of plugs too. I mean, he did the same thing with several of his, and when he had a chance to run it, he picked up a big first down too, and that's invaluable time, and he's picking up.
We got a question for you, Coach, from D-Dog on the YouTube live chat. Just curious about how you feel about Georgia's defensive line.
Yeah, I feel good about it. I like the rotation we got. I like the fact that we saw Tyler Clark go in there and make a lost yardage play early in the game. Sets the standard for us. We still haven't seen Rochester. I think they're just letting him get ready. But, when you look at our team from a depth perspective, we're building that, whether it's a White making a lot of plays, we've got Barnett. I mean, all these guys, they're just very competitive and they know the system. And we said this, that you were there listening to us at the show early in the year. Our running defense is going to be better because our pass defense is not going to have to need all this underneath coverage. So we're cutting those linebackers through. We're running guys through on a lot of different levels. But that's all set up front. So I'm happy with the defensive front, even though we've vastly outmanned every team we've played. But in the practices, the few that I've got to watch this year, it's been pretty evident that our defense has really benefited from going against our offensive line because everybody knows how big and strong they are.
Well, I want to give shout out to 2 guys, too, that I think had their best games of the season to this point, one of which is Tyler Clark, who in the first quarter was creating just a lot of mismatches and getting in the backfield. Everyone has been saying he's got to get back to that sophomore year form. I don't know if he's there. I'm not sure. I just know he's a really big contributor to the defensive line, and he's an athletic guy, strong, and Georgia needs him to be successful this season. But the other guy who we had not seen much of in the first 2 games was Malik Herring, and he was going on 2 and 3 guys at some point and just really creating opportunities for other people, including Tyler Clark. So I thought it was really good to see Malik Herring get a lot of playing time today.
Yeah, I like Malik. I like his attitude, the fact that he's an upperclassman, that, know it's his last rattle out of the box here. And, you find those guys a lot of times in coaching that stay the course, do what they're supposed to, avoid, any mishaps off the field and just be a good team guy. And he knows what his role is and he plays good technique, and that's what you got to do in this league.
What do you think about Georgia's secondary, Coach? Because they really shut down what is typically a pretty explosive offense from Arkansas State.
Yeah, the one thing that worried me going into this game, and I heard Kirby talk about it, was an inordinate amount of screens that this team threw. They really throw a lot of screens, and you got to come up and make the plays in the open field on them and get off the blocks and tackle. and we did that really well. They hit a couple there at the end of the game, but I would say overall, just our tackling in space and our ability to do the job was outstanding, and we played the ball in the air really well. I think Campbell might have had a little nick up there early. I'm not sure exactly what happened to him, but Daniel got a chance after missing all last week to come in and do some really good things. And we continue to see our star position with Webb and Devod Wilson just play really good on the slot receivers, and both our safeties continue to make open field plays. And I keep saying open field, but that's what you got back there. Last year we missed several tackles in big games, and I think our tackling's been good. But also our inside linebacker play continues to really impress me. All of those guys that got in there, we saw some really good plays, just by all those guys. They broke on the ball, they put some pressure on the quarterback, and they tackled in space as well. But overall, our back seven is 40-50% better, in my opinion, than it's been since Kirby's been here.
Well, and it's one thing just to talk about the depth that this team has at so many positions, because there have been players get nicked up along the way or get injured for a couple of weeks, with Isaiah Wilson being out, with Kearis Jackson being out, whatever, with Tyler Simmons, although it sounds like he's probably fine to play pretty soon with the injury that he had today. But then you talk about Tyson Campbell coming out. At all of those positions, Georgia has extremely talented players that can step in and play at an elite level. And Coach, with college football being as physical and difficult as it is, especially in the SEC at the level that Georgia plays, that's almost a requirement just to make it to where you need to make it in this season.
Yeah, and it helps on special teams too, Dayne, because these guys get their feet wet playing in those critical kicking situations, and then it's a little easier for them when the pressure's on, when they're called in to play in depth situations. Now, I think we got to be careful about giving ourselves too much credit about our depth, because when you're playing these runaway games, you're not really going against some of the teams that you might be early, later in the year, but because these guys are getting out there and you're seeing their athleticism and their tendencies to talk about our depth. But I would also quantify that by saying these guys are very competitive. Some of the guys that are our second and third unit guys in the secondary could have started the first year that Kirby was here, no question. So we got some really good guys in the backfield. We saw Seen make an interception today. Every time I ever go over there, he makes a play. Just really outstanding young safety that's going to jump right in there after Reed leaves. I like the way that Quay Walker really made a big play today too, and Crowder. Just can't say enough about when you beat somebody 55-0, you got a lot of good things happening.
Definitely so. And, there's a lot of teams that are having struggle wins or even upsets on a week like this where the slate doesn't seem as strong. So that says something about the mentality that Kirby Smart has for Georgia, that hasn't happened to this point in the season, even though, Georgia's talent and depth tends to overpower the opponent over time. I do want to kind of shift ahead slightly before we wrap up, Coach, and just when you have a big game like a Notre Dame, College Game Day is probably going to be in town. It's the primetime game on CBS. Do you prepare your team for the amount of attention that comes in any kind of different way? Do you try to insulate the chatter and everything? Because the eyes of the college football world will be on UGA for really the next week.
Kirby does as a head coach is he's able to communicate with his team about what the situations are that he's going to be involved with. And as far as a young player, when I say he, and what you're telling them is the reason you came to Georgia is to have a chance to play in a game like this, to play in the big spotlight. So we're going to be ready for it, but we got to understand we want to keep our mouth shut all week. As far as talking, the only people we're going to talk about is our own team. We're going to respect. We'll talk about how happy we are with our season. Talk about ourselves as far as being smart about not bragging too much, or really understanding that there's going to be chances for everybody to pat you on the back walking around campus. Just be careful about that and understand that we got to prepare just like they do. They got a runaway game today too. They're playing a pretty good team in Louisville the first game, but today they're playing New Mexico, who's having a hard time. Their coach in there, and they were ahead like 21-0. So, but I think the main thing is that Kirby does is like every head coach on Monday when they have a team meeting, they'll say these are our team goals for the week. We've got to do this, we got to do that, and they give intense scouting report. The personnel people here break down every player on their team and talk about their strengths and their weaknesses. Like, hey, when it's 3rd and 6 and he's got a release, he'll take a jab release or he'll do a 2-step release or whatever it might be. So you learn some of their, little idiosyncrasies that'll help you be a better player. So we'll be ready to go.
Athens will be crazy for the next week, and we'll have a lot of coverage for that and wrapping up the Arkansas State game on UGAsports.com. I guess let's go ahead and wrap up this show, Coach. We lost Radi, Nabulsi, and Jake from the stadium. They may have gotten kicked out as they prepare for that game next week. We have no idea, but maybe they're in downtown Athens by this point. Just your final thoughts on Georgia's performance against Arkansas State and where we are 3 games into the season.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, hey, if you could have scripted back in August where our team would be at this point, except for the injury to Isaiah and Kieris, you couldn't ask for much more. You've been able to build up some quality depth at quarterback, getting Bennett in there. You've gotten some of these young receivers, which were the question mark for our team, being able to get them step up and get quality time. And then the depth we built with our special teams, both punter and kicker, are doing great. So, I think now we're into what we call the second phase of the season here because, we're going to break it down. We got one more non-conference game and then all conference games to Tech. So I would think that at Kirby, just like any coach, there's some things that we can definitely work on, but got to feel good about where we are.
Georgia 55-0 win over Arkansas State. Jim Donnan, we always appreciate your time with UGA Sports and just grateful for everything that you do for us. We're going to wrap up this show and we will chat with you late as Georgia plays a night game. So I hope we can all stay up for that.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on, Dayne. My big deal to do this is just supplement my old player, Kirby Smart, and just so proud of him and what he and his staff are doing.
All right, thanks, Coach. That's our postgame show. See you next time.